Good afternoon and welcome to Mainer Talk. With all the clever email scams that are going around, it's really important to know what they look like and some of the ways to visually determine if the message is legit or not. So let's go phishing. Most cyber attacks start with a phishing email. So why do so many people fall for crafty emails, scams? Most users feel a sense of urgency or the need to act or respond to an email message before they've properly validated some of the areas that we call red flags. In our busy daily lives, we often respond quickly, either out of fear, based on a deadline, or the fact that the content makes us feel a sense of urgency. Many surveys indicate employees feel a sense of urgency to respond out of or based on job performance or deadlines. Again, multiple surveys have been completed and showing on the screen a breakdown of the percentages that people feel the reason why they click or act upon an email. Curiosity would be number one, fear would be number two, and simply the urgency to respond to an email would follow shortly there behind. So some of the most successful phishing emails revolve around tax, finance, HR, payroll, and even employment type subjects. And again, indicated here with some basic research, the W-2 phishing email is really one of the most highly successful email scam campaigns. We saw a major increase, a major spike in 2017 with this W-2 scam, and obviously this is only going to grow. Most of the W-2 based or tax-based scams are seasonal. However, the W-2 phishing scams and attempts can be run all year long. Obviously, as vendors need to be created in payroll systems and accounting systems, generally those corporations need to have W-2s on file. So this scam really can be run at all times of the year. This particular scam was so popular and prevalent that the IRS released an alert acknowledging the seriousness of the scam and the fact that it hit so many industries and so many users that they felt it was important to release this alert out to the public when it started to actually happen. So we'll talk a little bit about what lures an individual in an email message to click or respond or act. As you can see by the screen, the word attachment or email body content using the word invoice is one of the most successful and prevalent scams. People are genuinely concerned when they see that word, either based on an attachment or in the subject line. Again, people want to respond timely to invoices, make payments, and validate what they received is truly an invoice that they owe for. However, other types of messages that relate to finance are popular, as well as messages that respond a failure. So potentially an email you may have sent to a customer has bounced back. They're asking for you to validate a user ID and a password. Click here, link in the body of the message. That's also very popular. Not too far ahead of that would be scanned documents. And again, we used scanned documents back and forth to customers. Customers scan documents back and forth and send them to us, based on the fact that old techniques like faxing is starting to dwindle and people no longer use faxing as a method to transfer documents back and forth. So we're going to see an uptick on the scanned document type of lure. Another indicator here in the market that we've seen, the attempts have really been made to garner credential theft through the use of Apple iTunes accounts, followed shortly thereafter by Microsoft Outlook Web Access or Office 365 credentials. And one that's very popular and will continue to be on the rise is a Google Drive or a Box attachment or link to a document. We've seen the link and sharing emails explode as, again, we move our documents and data to the cloud. One area that we see growing is the Outlook Web Access or Office 365 credential phishing. As so many companies transition to cloud-based services and migrate their email to Office 365, this phishing attack is going to grow in popularity. As they transition away from having systems in-house that deliver email, you're going to see more and more of these types of attacks. And we have been contacted by clients of ours as well that have had and have seen quite a large uptick in these email messages sent to their own staff. Not far behind that, obviously, will be PayPal and financial phishing. That certainly has been active for some time now. However, people are becoming more aware of what those emails look like, and they're more apt to delete and not take action on those financial emails when receiving. Those types of emails, typically now companies have finally stopped sending link-based emails to their customers in an effort to help cut down on data loss and fraud. So what does the word phishing really mean? One definition is using fraudulent or misleading tactics in email to gain access to data, an individual's computer, or personal accounts through identity theft. That is really the definition of phishing. So when we talk about email phishing, what does that really mean? Again, it is the tactic of crafting an email and sending out to a victim to have them act upon that email to gain access to their computer or data. This form of attack has really been around since email really started, which was back in the mid-90s, and really took off on a corporate level. However, it's the easiest way for a criminal to gain access to your data or attempt to break into a system. Basically, you acting upon their email, giving them critical information they need to access your accounts or your data or your computer. This is the easiest way to attack. The old way was to simply break in or brute force their way in, and although this tactic is still prevalent, obviously the more efficient and easiest way for them to generate revenue is to gain access by you giving them access. So it's really critical to note some of the red flags that we're going to go over in some of the email articles that I have that I'm going to show you, so that you can kind of stay ahead of the curve and make sure that you're really scanning the email to make sure that it is valid before you take action on it. So we'll start with the email address. Since we've defined what phishing really is, we want to talk about the ways in which phishing email can be identified really quickly, kind of as a once pass as you receive stuff. Email spoofing is really the greatest technique used, and I'll go into detail about the sample I have on the screen in a moment. This is a technique in which is used to make the recipient believe that an email is legitimate and is sent from a valid email address. So with the examples on the screen, this example is the true email address would be from Jessica McCowan from a company called HelpTech. Jessica's real email address is jessicamccowan@helptech.com. You'll notice two examples of spoofed email addresses below. And if you quickly scan them and you don't take a moment to look at them, it would be very easy to assume that this email actually came from Jessica. One of them, the H is changed at the end of the word HelpTech, so it's HelpTech with a K. Or one that's really tricky, and you may not notice it at first pass, is in the HelpTech domain, I've changed the letter L to an I. So it looks very much like an L. You may just assume by looking at it quickly that it's a valid email message. However, it does not correlate to Jessica McCowan's actual email address, which is listed above. So basically the point here of this slide is really to slow down, take just a moment before you act upon the message you receive, and inspect the from address. Validate that the name and the domain of which the sender is sending you this message is legitimate. So here's a great example of one that we've received internally. And I'll go over a couple of red flags in this area. Again, as you become proficient at finding these red flags, they should jump right out at you. So the red flags that I want to go over first of all is the email at the very top is coming from a .co address, which is from Colombia. Clearly, if you're not doing business with someone, a company, or an individual within Colombia, that should be a red flag. Second, in the domain area, they've actually misspelled the word SharePoint. They've called themselves Shared Point with a D. So this would be an incorrect domain. Second of all, the body is very impersonal. What you're receiving probably is not how an individual would communicate with you if they were attempting to share a file of importance. It would not say, "Good day, admin shared an important file from you." It would say, "Good afternoon, hope you had a great weekend. Please click this link to view the file for the tax return I've prepared. Please let me know if you have any questions, and it would be signed from an individual. It would not be this impersonal. One other note on this sample is the file indicated in the body is actually an HTML web link. It is not a file. Now, obviously, there are links that we can click on that take us to third-party storage services like Dropbox, Google Documents, and Box, but this email actually indicates that it's sharing a file with you, yet the file that's listed is really an HTML link. So again, these are some areas that should jump right off immediately to say, this is not a legitimate email. Above and beyond, if you're not using SharePoint, or if the customer that sent this to you doesn't use SharePoint, you may or may not know, again, that would be a red flag as well. So we want to talk a little bit about email attachments, because that's another way in which you can come in contact with infection. So on the screen, I have listed 3 different forms of what appear to be Word document attachments. So what hackers will do is they will change simply the icon logo for the document to make it look like it's a known program that you would potentially use on a daily basis, such as Word. Of the 3 attachments that are listed on the screen that were actually received in an email, there is only one that is a true Word document, which ends in docx extension. The other 2 are meant to be made to look like they would be openable in Word. However, their extension is a .zip and a .exe, an executable. Many others that come in could be disguised as .pdf or even a JavaScript. But again, the idea behind spoofing the email attachment icon is to make you quickly feel comfortable that the document you're about to open is simply going to open in Word, when in reality the last 2 are really going to cause damage to your workstation. They could potentially install other software or again lead you to a website that would compromise your workstation. An area that we often don't spend enough time looking at would be links within the body of email messages. So note in this example, at the very top within the browser, the email message that was received is asking you to validate your credentials to a Google account. But yet at the very top, the URL that's actually in the browser that's about to redirect you to the site does not have the word Google anywhere in that URL. In fact, it's gibberish at the very top. Besides that, it is an HTTP address. It is not an HTTPS address. Most of Google's sites are all SSL protected, and you would be validating that by seeing the HTTPS. So in this instant, before we click yes, or before we enter our credentials, or before we click next, we would just want to validate at the very top of the screen that the URL is actually going to send you to the address that the email body stated, that it's a legitimate address. If ever in doubt about an email like this, or a screen in your browser that looks very similar to this, you're best not to click on it, delete it, or contact someone in the IT department to have them take a look at it for you. So another area that would be a red flag that we kind of need to be conscious about is the structure of emails. So emails that are suspect, an easy way to validate would be proper grammar and sentence structure. So look for poorly worded sentences or misspelled words. Literally, communications back and forth from companies are never going to go out looking like these samples. Their marketing and communications teams are going to make sure that these emails are properly spelled, that the sentence structure makes sense, and it would be conveyed to you as a consumer as if you were being spoken to by the company. So these 3 examples on the screen are great examples of some of the failures, really the visual indicators that would tell you these email messages are not legitimate. So if we look at number 1 in the left-hand side of the screen, really here, first of all, this is a message coming from a university. They would certainly not use a Comcast.net address to send this out. It would come from an EDU address. Second, if you read the body of the message, which really gets to the grammar and structure part of this, it says kindly sing in to view. Again, someone from a university would have proofed this first, and most likely they would have spell checked this before it went out. So that should be an indicator that this message is really suspect. And again, there is a link in the body of that email message that you could hover over with your mouse to validate before you clicked on it. The second example is from Wells Fargo, and this one has circulated around for quite a while. This is nothing new, and you can see based on the date of this example, it's been around since 2014, but I want to draw your attention to a couple of places. First, the Wells Fargo reply address is noreply@wfar.com. That would not be a traditional Wells Fargo domain reply address. It would say wellsfargo.com. So right off the bat, we would know that this is probably a suspect message. Again, in the body of the message, it is not only are there misspelled words, but again, it's very machine. It is not very personable. And again, the areas that draw attention would be towards the bottom, where they've misspelled the word apologize. Again, Wells Fargo as a corporation would never allow this type of message to leave without it being proofed through a marketing department or through a communications department. And again, most of your financial institutions no longer send emails with the links in them. They typically state in direct verbiage, please go to our website and validate your account credentials. They typically will not send a link out any longer for you to click on. If we look at the third one, the third message is pretty prevalent still. Obviously, people are using PayPal more than ever to send payments. So this one should be nothing new. However, again, if you look at the wording of it, you'll note that they're asking for you to validate your informations, not your information, which again, a corporation would validate this before they sent it out. Those misspellings and grammatical errors would have been corrected if this were truly a valid email. And again, at the bottom of the message, it just doesn't make sense. You are currently made disabled of these services. Generally, a person from this country would say or would type, these services are currently disabled for your account. It just would not be typed in the way that it is. So these are great examples of suspect messages that you probably should not take action on. You should most likely delete them, and they are spam or phishing attempts. So we'll talk about malicious URLs. As I indicated before, spoofed URLs state one thing, but they actually can take you or redirect you to a completely different site. Obviously, this email message was received by one of our staff members. And again, there are a couple of red flags here right off the get-go, but the one that I want to highlight is the link in the body of the message that the message is actually indicating you should click on. If you hover your mouse over this link, it actually goes to a site in Brazil. If this were a valid email message coming from a mail server indicating that you had an issue with your account, first, it would not come as machine language. It would come directly from your IT department. Typically, systems like email are not set up to send these types of messages to begin with. Again, other red flags in this, the reply domain is domain-admin.com. Again, if it came from your email account, it most likely would come from your own company's domain, so that's a red flag. But again, if you hover over the link, you can see it's going to take you to a place you clearly do not want to go to that could potentially harm where you're going to end up. So again, if this message were to come in, your best bet is to simply delete it, or in this case, potentially ask your IT staff to validate that this email is actually legitimate. At the end of the day, when you receive messages, you know how you communicate with customers and other individuals and staff. If something simply feels off, or the message is very vague, or it's very impersonal, chances are it's a spam message. If something just seems off about the message, it's probably a good bet that it is. Your sense about these messages, what you receive, what they look like, how you communicate is probably your best guide. If ever there's a concern about a message, it's really best to confirm the validity with your IT department. Don't wait to do that. Contact them immediately and say, I've received this message. I'm not sure about it. It may be legitimate. Can you validate it for me first? And really the last point is really the most important. If you weren't expecting an email message that you received, even from someone you know, the best way to validate it is to contact that person with a new email message using their email address out of your contact list. Don't simply reply to the spam email message that's on your screen. Address a brand new email to that individual that you received it from. Or simply call them over the phone and validate that they actually meant to send you an email. Again, it doesn't hurt to take just a couple of moments to validate that. And again, if you feel that the message is not something you would receive from them, and it is, if you were to delete it, chances are they're going to contact you again so that you take action on what they've sent you. So I want to just quickly go over one email address that one of our customers received recently from Office 365, or what they assumed to be. This was an account notification. So this came to me from one of our accounts, and she was unsure about whether or not this was a valid email address. They had simply just moved to Office 365, and so she was a little bit concerned about it. So I want to point out a couple of the red flags. Again, at the very top, the from address would typically be from Microsoft.com. It's certainly not going to come from Germany, which is a .de address. And the from address is not going to be a jumbled up numbers and letters combination. It would be support@Microsoft.com or accounts@Microsoft.com, something that's a valid domain. Again, in the body of the message, there are direct links to Microsoft Office 365 to the portal. The first one, again, you would typically not click on, but if we hover over the second one that I have highlighted, you'll notice even though it says to click here, you're going to go to portal.office.com, you're really actually going to be redirected to a site called bubblegumbakery.com. Well, that's clearly not Microsoft. So by hovering over that link, you can quickly validate that this is a spam message. We really don't even have to go into the grammatical area, but if you read the sentence structure, clearly there are sentence structure issues, and there are capitalization and punctuation that's not correct in this. Generally, from Microsoft, that message would have been validated by an IT aspect or area or marketing or communications department before it was actually created. So these are a couple of areas that should jump right out at you immediately that this is an invalid email. Again, if the message comes in and you're unsure, it's best to contact someone within the IT department to validate it. It doesn't hurt to delete a message. Again, if it's something that is valid from someone you are waiting for, believe me, they will contact you again, whether they'll send you an email message or you'll get a phone call. So it's important to keep these examples kind of handy so that you can refer back to them. These messages are still floating around. We do still have customers receiving these various types of email messages, whether they're from Wells Fargo, Chase, PayPal, Office 365, fake Apple ID email messages are very prevalent. And again, it's just really important to be aware of what you click on. Take a moment, give yourself a second to look over the message, validate some of the areas that I've pointed out, and hopefully you'll have enough of these examples where you know how to identify these attempts and how to handle these types of messages when you receive them. Again, go slow, take your time, validate first before acting on the emails. As always, if you have questions, we have the answers. Feel free to reach out to me at any time with any of your questions. I'd be happy to answer any that you have. And now we'll go ahead and answer any questions if you have in the chat box. So we have one that says, if you wanted to send a new email to the client to confirm the email, would the spoofed email already be saved in our contact list? Not necessarily, because you haven't responded to them using that spoofed email address. If you're typing a brand new email message and you've selected them from your address book, chances are it's going to be the correct email address, the one that you've corresponded back and forth with them. Because the spam message has come in one time and you have not acted on it, it will not be in your cached or recent sent messages. So if you open your address book and key up a new message, it should be from the legitimate person that you've done business with before. You certainly can contact me. My email's up on the screen. You have my number here. You can give me a call. Be happy to answer any of those questions. So one came up on the screen. If we receive an email that we know is spam, should we notify you or just delete it? So here would be my answer to that. I would say if you've taken a moment to quickly pass over the email message and you clearly see the red flags that I've indicated in some of the messages that just absolutely you can tell right off the get-go, the sender is from another country we don't do business with. There's links in it all over that they're asking for my credentials. I think those you can safely just immediately delete. If any come from someone that you've done business with that maybe you're suspect, I'm not sure if I was waiting for this, maybe they've just sent something to me that I may need to act on, it's certainly wise to have us quickly take a look at it. There's a couple different ways that we can validate links and or return senders without actually clicking on the message, causing our systems harm offline through other means, whether it be through an iPhone, which is a little bit more secure, or doing it in another fashion. But if it has clearly visible red flags, based on the examples I've given you, you're safe to just simply get rid of it. And I would suggest when you're done deleting it to also go into your deleted bin and empty that trash. We certainly don't want that message floating around to where you may go back to it at another time and forget that it's spam and actually take action on it. So make sure that you delete out of your deleted bin. But again, if there's any time when you've received an email message from someone that you have done business with or that is a partner or a company, certainly you can shoot it our way. We'd be happy to take a look at it for you first to be safe. So great question. What's the first best step to take if we think we've opened a hacked link or attachment? So this is how ransomware works if we're going to go down that road. Ransomware starts to encrypt files on your local computer first and then looks for any attached network devices, meaning any map drives, USB drives, thumb drives, anything of that nature. So if you think you've clicked on a link and nothing is happening, you don't see it take you to a website, nothing looks like it's running, your best bet is to power your computer off or simply pull the network cable out of the side of it so that it's no longer connected to our LAN. That way we can at least reduce the attack surface to just your laptop. However, your best bet is to simply power off, give us a call, and let us know that you clicked on something that maybe you shouldn't have. We can then take your computer, put it into safe mode, and look for anything that may be suspect on your workstation. But again, first thing to do, disconnect it from the LAN so it can't spread any further, and then power off your workstation and let us know immediately. That's probably the best way to combat that. Okay, if there were no other questions, I'll go ahead and finish this presentation. If anyone wants a copy of this presentation, I do have it in slide and PDF form. And also I'd be happy to present this to our customers as well. This is a really great primer for them to understand that we do more than just the typical IT support. We can also train them on kind of pitfalls and security issues that they may run into. So again, if there's any customers that you feel need this type of training, I'm more than happy to present as well. So one more question we had, if on Wi-Fi, should we turn that off? If you are on Wi-Fi and you do have an issue, again, it's best to disconnect from any type of connection, whether it's Wi-Fi or it's an Ethernet connection where you're cabled, because generally an outbreak gets started by the infection contacting a bot server out on the web and pulling down either files or executables or JavaScripts to run on your workstation. So your best bet is you can turn Wi-Fi off, but again, if you think for a minute that maybe you've clicked on something you shouldn't, the first thing to do is power off your computer. You may not know that something is running in the background, and by powering off your workstation, you basically stop that infection from running on your computer. Say if it were ransomware, you're going to stop the outbreak of ransomware from locking your files by turning it off. Clearly disconnecting from the network, LAN, or Wi-Fi is a help, but again, your best bet's to power off right away. Again, if there are any other questions, please feel free to shoot them my way. Thank you again.